Salisbury Cathedral, a masterpiece of early English Gothic architecture and proud owner of the tallest spire in England, 404 feet in all. But as lovely as it is, it's not its architecture that I'm going to talk about here. If you walk up the north aisle, you'll come across this striking Tudor effigy of a long-haired man in armour wearing a Lancastrian collar of S's. This is John Cheyne, a veteran of Bosworth and a loyal servant of both Edward IV and Henry VII. Cheyne was born on the Isle of Sheppey, and he rose to become a key member of Edward IV's household. He fought for Edward at Barnet and Tewkesbury in 1471, and Edward clearly trusted him, and he rose to become, amongst other things, a squire of the body, then master of the king's henchman, and ultimately master of the king's horse. And when Edward IV signed a peace treaty with Louis IX in 1475, Cheyne was one of the two knights left behind in France as a hostage to ensure that the English kept their word. Now, Cheyne's loyalty was very much to Edward, and when Edward IV died in 1483 and Richard III seized the throne, Cheyne soon became an opponent of the new monarch. He took part firstly in an unsuccessful bid to rescue the princess from the Tower, and then he was a participant in Buckingham's rebellion of October 1483. Now, this was a rebellion aiming to replace Richard with Henry Tudor. And I think the significant thing about this rebellion was the fact that many of its participants were actually former members of Edward IV's Yorkist household. Now, they had everything to lose by rebelling, and the fact that they were prepared to back Henry Tudor, I think, is evidence that they firstly believed that the princes were dead, but secondly, that they were disgusted at the way that Richard had seized the throne. Well, Buckingham's rebellion was a dismal failure. Cheyne had all his lands and possessions confiscated, and he fled abroad to join Henry Tudor in Brittany. And when Tudor landed in Wales to claim the throne in August 1485, one of his first acts was to knight Cheyne. So I guess this is Henry acting as king, but it also shows, I think, his trust in Cheyne, who became in effect his bodyguard. Well, he would certainly prove his worth at Bosworth, because he was with Henry Tudor when Richard launched his desperate charge in a bid to kill his rival. And of course, Richard nearly pulled this off. He managed to kill Henry's standard bearer, William Brandon, and he might well have actually reached Henry Tudor had not Cheyne got in the way. Now, we know that Cheyne was a giant of a man, and of course Richard was a rather slight figure, but it was in fact Richard who came off better. He sent Cheyne crashing to the ground stunned. But Cheyne had blunted Richard's momentum, and Richard's charge ran out of steam. His horse became stuck in a marsh, and fighting to the last, of course, he was cut down, surrounded by his enemies. Cheyne was well rewarded for his actions. His lands were restored to him, and then in 1486 he was made a Knight of the Garter, and then later ennobled. In 1487 he fought for Henry at the Battle of Stoke, and in 1488 he was briefly made Constable of Barnard Castle. I think that because Barnard was in Ricardian heartland and was a former possession of Richard III, Henry wanted someone up there that he could rely on while he was establishing his rule. And of course, our man Cheyne was just the man for that kind of job. Now, Cheyne continued to render the Crown military service. He commanded troops in Brittany. He fought against the Cornish rebels in 1497 before he died in 1499. One last story about Cheyne, and it's an odd one. It's said that when he was knocked off his horse at Bosworth, he was rendered unconscious, and when he came round, his helmet was nowhere to be seen. So it's said that he took his sword and cut the skull off a bull's carcass that just happened to be around at the time, and he used it as a helmet. Well, a bizarre story, but it is interesting that the Cheynes were later granted the bull's scalp, complete with horns, as a family crest.